Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Gumshoe Goes to a Quinceanera by Laura Hawkes, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. The barrel of the gun leveled at his head was about all Alexander could see. The world seemed to stop despite hearing the sounds from the street down below. Alexander couldn't see anything more than the barrel just moments before the bullet burst forth from the small cylinder head. As if in slow motion, Alexander saw the bullet careen towards him and the small puff of smoke upon its release from the revolver that once held the deadly capsule. He didn't realize he was struck other than to feel the force pushing him back. No pain, no feeling that the bullet made contact, other than he fell to the floor, blood dripping down into his shocked eyes. He'd never thought he'd go out this way or by this means. He always thought it would be in a blaze of glory with his companions around him, but those were the thoughts he had during the war. He was fighting for a cause then, a reason, truth, justice, the American way. For America against the dreaded Nazis or the despicable Japanese dying among the soldiers he trained and fought with. Not like this, not alone while doing a gumshoe job in a post-war world. How these thoughts managed to go through his mind, he had no clue. Then a brief momentary pain registered. The worst headache he'd ever experienced. It felt like his head was going to explode. It was then he realized it had. He'd been shot. His breathing became shallow as a shadow draped over him. His murderer stared down at him, a silhouette wearing a big hat and trench coat. He couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, for the revolver was still in his line of fading sight. A second shot rang out. A loudness he'd experienced many times before, even ones that had been aimed at him, but never this close, never this personal. This time he felt the foreign metal object pierce his skin, the burning sensation as it lodged within his body. He gasped. It was his last intake of air, and as he released it, so did he let go of his very life. Chapter 1. Meow. Gumshoe twitched in his sleep, his paws and body trembling and quaking as he dreamed the unthinkable. It wasn't fish or catnip that invaded his dreams, but memories so vivid and yet so obscure. He awoke with a start, as did his friend, Amelia Thomas. Amelia, better known as Mia, rubbed her eyes and reached down to the foot of the bed, finding the furry lump now sitting up and staring at her. More dreams? She asked quietly. Mew, mew, he replied, but although the words were in cat, he knew she understood them, understood him to say, more like a nightmare. Just a couple weeks ago, Mia turned 15 and got more than she ever dreamed possible for her birthday. She learned she was a witch, who descended from many before her. Her mother, Eve, was part of a coven in their small town of Midland, a community in Illinois. As part of coming into her powers, a familiar would attach themselves to the new witch. In this case, it was Gumshoe, the Siamese feline who, in actuality, was a reincarnated private eye from the 1940s. Gumshoe assisted Mia on her first and, she hoped, her last case of a murder that had happened at her father's newly opened restaurant, the Forbidden Fruit. In return, she promised to help Gumshoe discover what happened to his human self and his family. He'd had bits and pieces before he met her, moments when the human part of him that still remained wondered what in creation had given him the chance to be alive again, even if it was as a cat. He assumed there had to be a reason he came back from being killed all those years ago, yet he had no idea who he was, what he did, or why or how he died. He needed answers, and Mia was willing to help him find them. After her father had been cleared of all charges, Mia kept her promise. Unfortunately, many of the records were paper documents that were stored in a vault in Bloomington, the main town and sister city of Normal, about 39 minutes away from Midland. Computers only allowed her some access to articles that had been input, such as old newspapers, but the search had produced only a handful of results, at least in the beginning. It was Mia who learned Gumshoe had been murdered while he was human, that his funeral had been well attended, and his family had eventually gone on with their lives. Or at least he figured as much, since there wasn't much information on them after the news reported his death. The investigation had never been closed. The police never found his murderer and could only speculate as to why he was killed in the first place. A money deal gone wrong? A husband who didn't like him snooping around his affairs? Or something else? Since he'd had several cases open at the time, the police just couldn't narrow down who wanted him dead enough to murder him. Since Gumshoe learned of his demise, his dreams played out his death. He had no indication if they were truthful memories or an elaborate illusion. Either way, his nightmares persisted, and so did his desire to learn of his family and why he was killed. Who ended his human life? If he knew the who, he hoped he would discover the why. Mia, are you talking to your cat again? Adam Thomas didn't even knock as he opened the door to check on his eldest daughter. I swear, we need to get him neutered. He won't be mewing after females in heat if he's taken care of. His blue eyes glanced between Gumshoe and Mia. Meow, mew, meow. Instead of the feline sounds Adam heard, Mia heard instead. I will scratch his eyes out if he even tries to have me fixed. What does he think I am, a cat? I mean, a regular cat? Mia pursed her lips. It may have been slightly funny overall, but from her friend's point of view, it was not at all amusing. Dad, you promised we didn't have to get him fixed. Poppy, he can't keep waking up the household every time a female in heat walks by. He called her his pet nickname for her, and she knew she wasn't in too much trouble in keeping Gum safe from being neutered, even though he walked over and scooped him up. He's going outside for the rest of the night. I'll not have him disturbing the rest of the household. Gumshoe's ears twitched as he listened to them. If he tries to bring me to the vet, I will bite him where the sun don't shine and see how he likes it. Mia thought back to Gumshoe. We'll figure something out. Maybe your dreams are more clues to your past and we're just remembering them. But Dad is right. I have that big test later today, and I really need sleep. Although Mia had a charmed necklace in order to talk to Gumshoe when they weren't together, she was able to do so without the charm on when they were near each other. She was grateful she could send her thoughts to him and he to her mind without her father or others knowing she was a witch talking to her familiar and getting answers. She had enough problems as an ordinary 15-year-old, without the added problems of being weirder than normal for adults to understand. Speaking to her father, Mia added, It's not females he's anxious about, it's his dreams. He twitches and looks like he's fighting, or maybe playing. I don't know what cats dream about, but he wakes himself up from them. I really don't think it's a female in heat that is setting him off, I swear. Adam sighed. Figures my daughter would want a temperamental feline. This has to stop, Poppy. If he wakes up your sister or your grades start dropping because you're not getting enough sleep, then we will revisit the discussion to neuter him again. Fair? In the meantime, he goes out. Yes, Dad. Get some rest. School's in a couple of hours, and I believe you said you had a test in biology today. I do. I'm going to get some rest, and I'm ready for the test. I promise. Good night, Poppy. Adam tightened his grip on the Siamese and slowly shut the door behind him and Gumshoe. Gumshoe watched as Mia settled back down in bed before the door was shut, blocking his view. He was awake, and dealing with more dreams or nightmares or memories of his past was something he wasn't quite ready to deal with again at the moment. The last had been exceptionally vivid, and he felt like he could still feel the last breath expelled from his body. He wasn't ready to relive that anytime soon. Sorry, buddy, Adam said as he opened the back door and set Gumshoe down. Go howl all you want outside. We'll see you in the morning. The part of Adam hated setting him outdoors, but his family's sleep was important, and he had to put them first, even if the cat seemed a remarkable feline who recently helped to save his daughter's life. Gumshoe gave him a look before he trotted off. I'll be back for my coffee in the morning. He gazed up at the moon and stars overhead before he decided to head over to Lake Henderson. It was a good place to get a few more hours of rest and contemplate his dreams to see if they were part of his human life, as well as how his life had changed in but a moment. He had been left with thousands of questions. Would he ever have the answers he sought? Or would he just be as familiar with nothing more important in his life other than to avoid being neutered? The human that still remained inside of him wanted to know. No, he needed to know who killed him and why. What had he ever done in his life that was worth 2 bullets in the head? Who hated him that much? Would he ever know the truth? Finding a comfortable spot, he laid down. He hadn't been there very long when he heard voices arguing. Although he had good hearing thanks to the feline he now was, he couldn't make out the words, but he knew one of the participants. He recognized Mark Kingston, the postman. How many times had Gumshoe sat by the window watching as he came to drop off mail for the family? And when Maddie, the youngest daughter, got any mail, even her highlights magazine, she was so thrilled she hugged Mark around his leg before he patted her head and went on his way. So what was the mailman doing in the park by the lake in the middle of the night? And who was he having an argument with? Curiosity may have killed the cat, but not Gumshoe. He died another way, and he was curious to know what was going on now. The human private eye that was still in him needed to have answers. Gumshoe hadn't taken more than 10 steps when he heard a loud ringing sound, a sound he knew all too well, having just had nightmares about it. He stopped dead in his tracks. He could see Mark crumble to his knees, holding his chest with one hand, the other reaching up to his assailant, whose back was still to Gumshoe. But like in his dream, the antagonist didn't back down. He shot again. Mark fell over, lying unmoving at the assaulter's feet, his now unseeing eyes staring directly at Gumshoe. Backing up slowly, Gumshoe quietly remained hidden in the brush to see if he could catch a glimpse of who the attacker was. When the assailant moved away from the body, Gumshoe took off. He had to find help. He had gotten to the edge of the road when his ears twitched as he heard a splash. Turning back to where Mark had lain just moments ago, the spot was empty of his body and the murderer was walking away. Enough illumination from the moonlight gave Gumshoe a view of his countenance. He didn't recognize him, but he'd never forget him either. Gumshoe realized he threw Mark's body into the lake and probably weighted it down so he wouldn't be easily found. Gumshoe continued to run back to the Thomases' house. He'd have to have Mia get the help that was needed.